In today's session, I'm going to be using a practical example to illustrate and to perhaps portray the principles of wealth and how anyone can begin the journey, irrespective of who you are, irrespective of what you earn. And I want you to stay tuned. Now, I'm going to use some very basic figures. It may not really apply to you directly, obviously, because your circumstances are different, but I want you to focus more on the principles rather than the individual or myself. Just keep your eye tuned to the principles and ask yourself a number of questions as I go along. One of them should be, are there any ideas that I can take from this session and apply in my case or apply in my life? Number two, are there some ideas that can help me increase my level of understanding? And number three, can I become more aware of where I am financially? Those are the three objectives that I have for you today. Now, the model I'm going to present is going to be based on assuming that I'm dealing with a single individual. They have a job and they work based on a standard working hours, and perhaps they don't have much to invest and they don't have an investment plan. And I want to give you some ideas and tips. This will not be a complete investment, design. I just want to share one or two areas and how very easily you can start making some changes. Let's start with some assumptions. I think that's the best way to start. The first assumption I'm going to make is that this individual earns £2,000 net every month. I'll make that assumption. I'm also going to make the assumption that this person is single and does not have a family. And I'm going to make the assumption the person has a full-time job and works, say, from 9 till 6 p.m. every day. And that goes from Monday to Friday. Just some basic assumptions. In addition to that, let me assume at this point that the person pays about 30% of, in this case, probably about 30% of their income on perhaps a rental home or perhaps a mortgage if they have one. On that basis, we're going to say this is £600. Now, what I want to show you is how very easily you can start to create wealth. Now, if you follow the formula I'm about to give you here, you can become financially free in less than 10 years. You can do it much less. Applying this principle has enabled me to achieve financial freedom in less than 5 years, actually less than 5 years when I started to apply the principles. It did take me some time to study. I did spend about 3 years studying a lot of the principles and the success formulas and studying the lives of the people that I admired. But as soon as I started to apply the principles, it took me less than 5 years to become financially free. As a matter of fact, I achieved financial freedom by age 30, and I was able to retire from my engineering profession aged 33. Now, I should qualify that by saying that you don't retire from. The key thing about life and living well and being fulfilled is to retire to something. So although I've retired from engineering, I have a much bigger purpose that is keeping me fulfilled and keeping me active and keeping me going. One of which is me actually teaching you. Now, there's something I call my 65-35 plan. This is the plan that I used to create financial freedom. This is the plan that I want to share with you. Now, I'm going to give you the basics, and then you can decide how you can apply the same formula, maybe adjust it somewhat in your case. Now, this formula or plan comes in two parts. There's the first part of it deals with investing, and the second part deals with spending. The key thing here is that to create wealth, there is a formula you must understand, you must be willing to commit your life to. The formula is simply that you must, when you earn, the first thing you must do is invest. Once you're done investing, then you can spend, but you spend based on a budget so that if there's any surplus, you can save. This is the key formula to wealth. There's a difference between the wealthy and the poor, and that comes down to the word habits. Now, to understand the formula for wealth, you have to see wealth and poverty as two sides of a coin. I want you to be able to stand on the edge, because every coin has three sides. Wealth is on one side, poverty is on the other side. If you can stand on the edge, then you can choose which works better for you. To appreciate this wealth formula, you have to understand what the formula for poverty is. Poor people earn. The first thing they do is spend. Because they spend usually more than they earn. They have expenses that exceed their income. They have little or nothing to save, so they remain poor. This is the formula for poverty. Now, this is the formula you're going to be adopting. So the 65-35 plan has two parts. The first thing we want you to do is invest. Then you can spend the rest. So how does this apply to this individual who, in this case, or using this example, has only £2,000? This is it. 35% is the investment plan. And you allocate this 35% to strategic causes. 10% goes to what we call active investment. 10% goes to what we call passive investment. 10% will go to charity, and 5% will go to investing in your mind. Now, I often say you can always have this as yourself for fun. In truth, if you ask me how I did mine, I would rather recommend that you invest the 5% in your mind, because think about this. When a farmer has a harvest, the farmer must always take a portion of the harvest and use it as a seed for the next season. So every day you must take a portion of what you earn and reinvest in your mind, because everything you have has been created by your mind. So if you want to become wealthy, you must continue to feed your mind. Having said that, I understand that there's a challenge, because you're having to sacrifice 35% of what you earn. And so I also say, if you feel this to be too much of a burden, then the 5% can be allocated to fun. You're having fun, if that makes things feel easy for you to accept. Now, this means, just by looking at this, that you will be investing 20% in total for investment. Active is different from passive. Active means you put in an active measure. The passive, I kept that separately, because in some cases, some people have debts. And one of the things we would do if you're already in debt is we want to pay off your debt very quickly, as quickly as we can. So if you're in debt, some of your passive income or fund will go towards paying off your debts. If you do not have any emergency savings set aside, some of this can go towards that. But the truth is, 20% in total of what constitutes the 35% is meant to be used for investing. This simply means that the 65% you have left must now become a budget, meaning you must learn to live on 65% of what you earn, meaning that your expenses must be capped so that they do not exceed 65% of what you earn. This is challenging, but it's doable. It just needs a little bit of creativity. Most people say, well, I cannot live on 65% of what I earn. And I just say, well, if you just look around, be creative. What you find is there's so much you can do in terms of saving. I'll give you a simple example. When I started my process and my formula, one of the things I had to do was I had to sit down and look through my expenses. And I asked myself the question, how could I reduce this expenses down to 65%? What I found was that my expenses came in two parts. There were what we call needs, and there was what I had, which are called wants. The needs were necessities: shelter, food, clothing, feeding. I've talked about it already. But these are basic necessities. The wants, on the other hand, I found in my case, there were two parts to the wants. There were what I call luxury wants and necessity. So necessity wants were things like social life, maybe going out for a meal with friends, travel, going out to a show, just the basic things you need to fill a life. But the luxury ones were items that I paid for that I didn't need. The shoes, the clothes, the accessories, the cars that I just didn't need. Now I decided to discipline myself to get rid of these first. By getting rid of my luxury ones, I was able to reduce my expenses down to about 75%. Then I went down to my necessity ones and I asked myself the question, is there something I can do smartly to reduce it? Simple thing I did, for example, was I recognized that every day I was spending about £5 in the morning for breakfast. By the time you buy porridge, you buy a drink, you spend about £4.95. During lunch break, by the time you go out and get yourself something to eat, you buy maybe a protein bar or a snack bar, and you buy some nuts. You spend about £9.90. So every day I was spending about £15 just eating out. So I decided to take in my lunch. I decided to go with a packed lunch instead and go with breakfast. And I was able to save about £10 per day. Now £10 per day over 20 working days in a month is £200. £200 for someone who is earning £2,000 is already 10% you've saved. Meaning I was able to reduce my 75% down to 65%. Now it made this possible. Now for you, obviously things are different. I'm not giving you this example to suggest that that's what you have to do. I'm only simply saying that when you set a budget for yourself, it makes you quite creative. It makes you think. So what I want you to do is, rather than think about 65% as a cap on your expenses, I want you to ask yourself, what can I change in terms of my lifestyle to make my future more possible? Remember what I said to you, that the difference between the wealthy and the poor comes down to the habits they have. Your habits determine your lifestyle, and your lifestyle choices decide whether you become wealthy or not. Now I want to show you something that is going to be very simple but very powerful. If we go back to this £2,000 and we assume 10%, at 10% means you would save £200 per month. Now £200 per month, if you invest this in an investment vehicle that paid a 10% rate of return, if you did this over 45, 50 years preferably, in the end of 50 years you have about 1.28 million. All you're doing is saving a portion of what you earn every day. So simple. If on the other hand you were able to put in, this is your active investment, if you were able to put in your passive investment, that would be another £200. In the same investment you might end up with something of roughly about £3 million in 40 years. Now if you did both of them together as one lump sum of £400 that you're investing, then you would only have to invest, rather than 45 years, you would only have to invest for about 40 years. Now, what am I doing here? I'm trying to demonstrate to you that by disciplining yourself to set aside a portion of what you earn, you can create a future. Wealth is created slowly. I want to say that again so you understand. It's not a get-rich-quick scheme. It's boring. Creating wealth can be boring if you do it the right way, but it requires long-term thinking and planning, and it requires patience. You do it slowly. Now, if you were to go through the compound calculation, just using this example of £200, what you find that in year 35, you probably have only about 550,000 in your investment portfolio. By year 40, maybe you have about 700. By year 45, this goes to about 490. However, between year 45 and year 50, this goes up to more than 1.2 million. Meaning that the longer you keep the money and you stretch, the more it multiplies, because it uses the principle of compounding. you might be thinking, I don't want to wait for one whole, or rather half a century for me to see myself become a millionaire. Obviously, I'm not more than 50 years old, so I didn't have to wait till I was 50 to become financially free. There is an alternative. This is just a simple way of saying long-term investing. The question is, how do you bring that time? How can you shrink that 50 years down to about 10 years? The key here is this word: wisdom. That's the key to wealth. And if you want to be wealthy, you need to understand this word. This is how the wealthy get wealthy. Leverage. Leverage comes in a number of ways. Other people's money, other people's time, other people's knowledge, other people's experience. Leverage is simply your ability to do more with less. So the key to creating wealth is to establish what we call passive and leveraged sources of income from multiple sources, meaning you can get more done by using the advantage of leverage. But to do this, you need financial wisdom. And that is the reason why I said you should invest 5% in your mind, because that will show you the pathway to wealth. Now, I cannot go through the whole detail of what to invest in, but one of the things I'll just draw out as I summarize this is to say this to you. Investing is a plan. I know many of you watching are probably thinking, can you share what you did? Can you share ideas? Most people want to know about, okay, did you invest in real estate? Did you invest in oil, gas, gold, silver, bonds, mutual funds, stock? All of those things are simply options, vehicles, strategies, opportunities. That is not what makes you wealthy. Wealth is created from a plan. It's a plan. From your plan, you develop a strategy. But the plan and the strategy is only as good as the investor, which is you. So it goes back to the same thing I said. You have to invest in your mind. One of the things I try not to do is tell people what to invest in, because otherwise you're no different. You're no wiser than you were before you started listening to this. I want to encourage you to invest in yourself, because by investing in yourself, you start to see opportunities that you can avoid, but also opportunities that you can take the best advantage of. Now, I hope that's been useful. The key thing I want to say to you is this: even if you earn £2,000, discipline yourself to live on no more than 65%. 35% you're going to invest. 10% of that will be active, 10% will be passive, 10% will be for charity, 5% will be investing in your mind. If you follow this process, and if you're happy to listen to any of my other Wealth series or sessions, I provided some extra information on, investment paths. I provided information on, how to get out of debt. I provided information on how to create wealth using various channels. I believe if you follow this principle, you can become financially free in less than 10 years. It's really possible. I'm teaching this to so many people around the world, and the changes are ridiculous, if I should use that word. It's just mind-blowing. It's very simple, but it works. I hope that's been useful. Let me wish you the best of luck.